Well, hello, everybody. Good evening and a very happy Saturday to all of you. It is Saturday. It's a Saturday. Hold on, fix my camera here a little bit. It's been terribly snowy recently, but it was like 50 degrees today, so we were digging snow and throwing it onto the driveway so it could melt, and then digging more snow and throwing it on the driveway so it could melt. And, you know, I'm hearing there's more snow coming. Because why would that not be the case? But for now, we're warm, we're here with each other, and we're here for another night of story time. Tonight we'll be continuing with some indie authors in here. We have a duel set up for tonight. We're going to have something similar on Tuesday. Tonight, we start out with Altar of Scales by Chace Randolph, Book 1 of the Descendant Saga. We move on from here after that to A Noir Story by A.C. Sherman. Now, each of these we're going to read 3 chapters, enough to give you a little taste, make you want to go out there and pick up the book for yourself, because really, what could be better? Support that indie author. Now, Altar of Scales is going to be slightly unique. There is an audiobook out there for it, voiced by Chace Randolph. His portrayal and his performance will be different than mine. You're never going to get two audiobook narrators who give you the same performance. One thing that will be different, it's his book. He knows how to pronounce the character names. He knows all of the things that are coming up. He knows exactly what emotion he was looking to put into the book when he wrote it. It means that the portrayal will be a little bit different because of that. The other side of that is I am reading it live to you here, which means I just continue to roll with whatever we've got, where when you record the book, you can redo takes over and over and over again. It's okay. I'm happy with the way that it's going to come out. It also means that if you enjoy audiobooks more, the first 3 chapters here tantalize you, you can always go out there and pick up the audiobook available on Amazon and Audible, or pick up the book itself. I know it's available on Amazon. Likewise, stop out to the other places to support the author, wherever he happens to be. On the recorded video of this, which you will be able to find later this evening on my YouTube channel, you can see some more links that I will have for you of ways for you to engage with the author. Now, when it comes to A Noir Story, you guys may be familiar with A.C. Sherman. He brought us Once Upon a Time in Detroit. You guys may remember me reading that story to you. The first 3 chapters of Once Upon a Time in Detroit are available on the YouTube channel for you to listen into, and the first 3 chapters of A Noir Story will also be available on YouTube after this evening for you to listen to. There is not an audiobook out there for A Noir Story, which means you got to pick it up and read it. You're only going to be able to get the first 3 chapters from me. Other than that, on Tuesday, we finished up The Flow A Hedonist Guide to Buddhism, Meditation, and Travels in Thailand, a travelogue memoir by Lawrence Davidson. If you missed the end of it, also available on my YouTube channel. Hey, there might be a consistent theme here. If you want the recordings, my YouTube channel is where you will find them. Live, we are on YouTube, Twitch, Kick, Rumble, and X. Recorded, you can go find them on YouTube. youtube.com/@SirArminius. That is your location for all of these live read recordings that I do. Hope you'll stop out there and check them out. Give a like, give a subscribe. Remember, subscribing on YouTube is free. And if you like audiobooks, I have a variety of things for you to listen to there. Once again, they're all live performances, which means they are a bit different than what you would get out of a polished audiobook. But know that most of the time I am sitting here reading it for the first time with you. I am reacting with you. The audio that I'm putting out there is that of a reader who is experiencing this for the first time. It's kind of a different way that I do this than I would do my professional audiobook recordings. Those ones I read the book in advance, I study up, I may read it several times, I look ahead, I have all the harder words mapped out, I've got pronunciations and accents and voices and all of that stuff planned in my head before I ever get there. I don't do that here. I like to experience the book with you guys, and I think it makes the experience of reading this together that much more poignant to do it that way. As always, because I am recording these, I will not be speaking up and interacting while the stream is going on. Not while the stream is going on, but in the middle of the chapter. But if you guys have thoughts, comments, anything else, feel free to throw them into the chats wherever you happen to be, and I will be happy to react to them in between chapters, or at the end of the book in this case. End of the book, end of 3 chapters. Whichever way it works out for you, that's what we're going to do. So, everybody, sit back, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we dive in starting tonight with Altar of Scales. And we begin, of course, with Chapter 1, Hot Nights. Screams, high-pitched, terror-filled screams, echoed down a dark tunnel, stirring ZostaMax, who stood from the boulder he sat upon inside the tunnel's depths. Taking his spear from where it leaned on the rocky wall behind him, he ran blindly through the unlit tunnel toward the light at the end. In the dark, his bare feet thudded unafraid upon the naked rock as it sloped gently upward, a path worn smooth from centuries of feet like his. The air grew warmer near the tunnel's mouth. Not a good sign. This late in the year, it shouldn't still be this warm so late at night. ZostaMax pushed through those thoughts from his head. He didn't need the weather distracting him from whatever horrors awaited. He paused at the end of the tunnel to ready himself, sacrificing a second to suck a deep breath into his broad, tanned chest. Then the screams came again, weaker, more strained this time. ZostaMax got poked in the eyes as he stepped out of the mouth of the dark tunnel. His eyes had adjusted to the blackness inside and worked painfully hard to readjust to the firelight. He saw only shapes and silhouettes at first, dark pinpoints against the wall of orange light. By the noise before his eyesight adjusted. The shrieking stopped, and the roaring began. The other 2 watchmen from the shift had remained outside, weapons already at hand. A shorter man, a fire builder, named Ibenex, with his tinderbox still under one arm, led 2 scouts toward the safety of the tunnel, waving the lanky women into the safety of the tunnel. A Balaur commanded ZostaMax's attention. Balauri were big, mean, cold-blooded semi-bipedal lizards with wings. They varied in size, colors, and patterns. They were smart enough to make plans, work together, and make probing attacks. When there was one, there was always more. The reptilian beasts never traveled alone. They flew and hunted in packs. ZostaMax only saw the one, and that unsettled him even more. It was a blood-red monstrosity with black stripes starting at its snout that trailed over its head and spiny body to the tip of its tail. The bright firelight shone blood spatter over the ruby scales. A shimmering mist smeared against the reptile's dull red. The Balaur had gotten a hold of one of the scouts, a severed arm clamped in its jaws and the torso pinned beneath its body. ZostaMax made eye contact with the fiend. He measured only about 30 paces of sandstone keeping between them. Its eyes had a hateful look, as if the creature was trying to rip out his soul with its slotted pupils. The Balaur's jaw slackened, and the shredded appendage fell to the ground. Its attention diverted from the fallen victim to the ones it wanted to maul next. The other two watchmen backed towards the tunnel entrance, standing shoulder to shoulder with ZostaMax as the fire builder made it inside with the two surviving scouts, huddled in the darkness, just deep enough to hide in the tunnel's shadows. The three lean, long-haired men, with skin tanned to a golden mahogany by the sun, set their jaws and planted their heels in the entrance. The reptile growled and slowly crept forward, keeping its head low, its jaw nearly scraping the ground. Its scaly red neck coiled like a snake, snugging its head up against its shoulders before unfurling its wings. The leathery membrane cast a dark shadow that oozed over the rock. The firelight behind the Balaur made its wings glow. The light filtered through the crimson skin, showing the walls on either side of the tunnel opening with blood light. ZostaMax didn't turn to look, not daring to remove his eyes from the reptile. Instead, he relied on his ears, listening to the scouts' footsteps as they fled, scampering deeper into the tunnel. At the end of the maze-like warren, resting on top of the excavation, was a solid metal fortress known as Lingrad, a fortress called down from the sky by the ancestors to protect humanity from these savage animals and their ilk. It now lay, half buried by the sands of time. The fire builder didn't leave with the scouts, instead producing a finely crafted, deeply curved knife, holding his ground behind the other three. ZostaMax held his trusty spear, and his fellow watchmen both held axes. The group of men stood bare-chested, jaws set as the Balaur loomed. Standing resolute, they were the only thing standing between the cold-blooded monster and the dark, twisting recesses of Lingrad's bowels. Descending from above, drifting out of the gloom into the circle of firelight, two more reptiles alighted upon the stones, the wind whispering under their wings as they landed. They didn't crawl like the red one. They looked older, prouder, standing upright on their hind legs, tucking their wings neatly behind themselves while holding their smaller forelimbs up against their thick barrel chests. Both were a soft green color like delicate, fresh foliage, with broad, flat scales on their bellies that were gray like sun-bleached wood. They differed from each other in the pattern of the tan freckles that spangled them. Their brows furrowed as they strutted closer. They stood head and shoulders above the tallest of the men, appearing composed and dignified, almost civilized. ZostaMax had never been in such proximity to the Balaur before. They appeared coherent and intelligent, not animals like their smaller red counterpart. The pair came forward, flanking the other. With heads bowed, each dropped to a knee beside the red one. They had to lean forward as they reached with their short forelimbs, resting a three-fingered hand on each of the red Balaur's shoulders. The red menace drooped, setting its chin on the stone, upper lip no longer vibrating with rage. Its horizontal pupils narrowed, pulling into focus again. The flare in its nostrils shrank and its wings flopped to the ground, their grotesque shadows disappearing as they deflated, looking lean and desperate. The green Balauri led it away. It stayed on all fours, head low, tail dragging across the stones as it gently repacked its wings, rolling and folding them to fit atop its back. The Balauri shuffled past the fire and stood on the far side of the dancing flames. The red one stayed on all fours, looking from one to the other of its escorts. Expressions on its inhuman face changing, its thick, scaly hide struggling and contorting with multiple emotions, perhaps shame or embarrassment. ZostaMax watched intensely now that his eyes had adjusted to the light. The Balor looked back with longing and hunger at the four men who stood blocking the opening of the tunnel with weapons still in hand. Restless hisses and rumbles from the green pair, along with fidgety rolls of their shoulders and snaps of their jaws that made audible claps, pulled the red one's gaze away. The watchmen stood resolute, guarding the tunnel entrance as the animals deliberated. They watched, sweating nervously, one of the Balauri stamping a foot and growling, while the other gave a low, guttural hiss. They could feel some of the low-frequency conversation through the stones with their bare feet. The man to ZostaMax's left leaned in and whispered through the side of his mouth, "We should attack while they're distracted, doing whatever it is they're doing." ZostaMax, with brow furrowed, shook his head without taking his eyes off the scaly beasts. He didn't speak, afraid to attract their adversary's attention. He couldn't be sure if these two green ones would lead the slender red one away, or if they were coming to help it. Balauri would commonly make false probing attacks. With so many massive winged beasts on their doorstep, no one was comfortable. One human had already found a violent end this night. The man on his left continued, "Why not? They killed her. Is it not our duty to defend our people? To avenge her? They're distracted with each other, and who knows what they're doing? They could be planning anything. Might come back and eat the rest of us, too. We should attack now while they aren't paying attention, and we still have the limbs on our bodies." The other watchman, on his right, said what ZostaMax was thinking. "There's 3 of them and 3 of us. They're bigger and stronger than any human. They have pointy bits on more ends than we do. Here, their advantage is diminished because of the tunnel. We can fight them here. But with them out there, we would have to cover all that open ground. Without the cover of the shadows, we'd be in the firelight. We wouldn't have the element of surprise, and our small soft bodies would be at a disadvantage without the limbs attached to them." He trailed off as the first man interrupted. "Here they come. Get ready. This is it." One of the giant green beasts had stayed on the far side of the fire, stretching its neck, looking even more massive as it inflated itself. The other green one led the now defeated-looking red one back towards the men with a clawed forepaw on its shoulder. ZostaMax spoke. "Don't start something we can't finish. They vastly outweigh us, despite our equality of numbers. If it was just the red one, then I would have us hack it to bits. Not with these other ones here. They know what they're doing. I don't know what they intended, but they prevented more bloodshed. I'm not sure if they mean to cause more violence or not. Let's not provoke them. Maybe we'll live another night. These ones seem reasonable." The man on the left's eyes bulged. "Reasonable?" The pair stopped no closer than the red one had come to the tunnel entrance earlier. A long moment of silence let the tension creep to a palpable level. Dragging on, only interrupted by the fire crackling in the night, its flickering light pushing the monster shadows this way and that. Undulating and twisting inky phantoms of Balauri smeared on the rocks around the tunnel entrance. The second watchman shouted to the creatures, as if yelling would make his words more understandable. "What now, you filthy lizards?" Both men and Balauri winced at the broken silence. The Balauris' heads recoiled on their long necks. The green one stamped a foot. The red one, still on all fours, sighed, making a long, deep, hollow noise, revealing how massive and powerful the creature's lungs were. After a sharp inhale to refill its lungs, it made a single, low noise, almost a whine, sorrowful and depressed. The noise drug on for several seconds as it held the whimper while making sustained eye contact with each of the watchmen. It took all of ZostaMax's will not to look away from the narrow, slitted pupils in its amber eyes. The green one closed its eyes, the armored eyelids making an audible snap as it drooped its head. It straightened while the smaller red one turned. The men watched them walk past the fire. After a short running start, galloping on all fours, each hopped, and the three took off in rapid succession. The powerful beat of their wings churned the flames around and made the air waft back into the opening of the tunnel. The gust carried the stench of fire and blood. Powerful strokes carried them up, fire circle of light, and far enough away that the sound of their wings stirred the air was inaudible, carrying them away into the night as if they had never existed. The other watchmen rushed back into the light around the fire pit. Their axes at the ready, the fire builder lunged out of the tunnel's mouth, past the watchman, and crossed the space to the fallen scout, sheathing his curved knife along the way. ZostaMax approached the scene gingerly, following the fire builder, now recognizing the hairy shoulders as belonging to Ibanez. ZostaMax didn't get too close, not daring to step in the woman's blood. That felt too personal, too intimate. He didn't even know her name. It didn't feel right to walk in her blood. He kept his distance. Ibanez had no problems about it, going through the puddle and straight to her side. He knelt and lifted her torso into his lap. Even without her arms, and with so little blood left, she still clung to life. The woman's resilience impressed ZostaMax. She spoke, whispering, while Ibanez held her and cried. After a few words, she gave up. She passed, the last breath like a breeze through the curtains of her lips. ZostaMax wasn't sure if she had formed words or only made incoherent, shock-stricken mumblings. Ibanez stayed with her and wept. ZostaMax left, leaving Ibanez cradling the body. The scout was beyond his help, beyond anyone's help. ZostaMax felt awkward standing around, doing nothing next to the sadness of his comrade. He went back down the tunnel, into Leningrad, to get the healers or the shaman or whoever to take care of that mess out there. He had been awake for far too long. Exhaustion caught up to him as his adrenaline wore off. All he wanted was to go back to his bunk amidst the warren inside the fortress and sleep. ZostaMax spent a long time searching before he found anyone still awake. It was the darkest hours of the night, the quiet time before the sunrise when the planet itself slept. There was no noise, no people about, no activity at all. ZostaMax eventually found Thulvox, though that wasn't who he had wanted to find, but he was certainly the authority figure to take charge of the situation. Thulvox was the captain of the Watchmen. He wasn't as tall as most, just shoulder high to ZostaMax, but his shoulders were broad, his chest deep, his arms massive. He was one of the strongest men this ancient place had ever known. His broad form bared the hallway, a lit torch in one hand, coloring the ceiling with another layer of soot from its oily smoke and a crude club, fashioned from the femur of a Balauri, in the other. He growled deeply at ZostaMax, making no attempt to hide his distaste for the younger man.
I heard from a couple of scouts that you led a Balauri into the fire pit, that the monster would have gotten in and killed everyone if it wasn't for Ibanez. He's not even a watchman. He's just a fire builder. Yet he did your job.
ZostaMax knew he couldn't explain himself to this man, who had already decided on his worth long ago. ZostaMax had found many times in the past that once Thulvox made up his mind, there was no room for further interpretation. Thulvox could never be wrong. He was the resident and most mighty Slayer. ZostaMax knew it wasn't worth his time or effort to get the story straight with his superior. Instead, he told Thulvox a half-truth, closer to what he expected to hear, just to get to the other side of the conversation faster, choosing the short, painful route over the long, arduous one.
The Balauri left. Ibnex is out there with the scout who got mauled. She gave in to her injuries after the Balauri left. 2 others are still on guard out there. They'll see the night through until the sunrise brings the heat again. It doesn't surprise me that Ibnex would be able to drive the beasts off. He is the oldest son of one of our greatest leaders. I shall fetch his mother. Zastava will know what to do. Now you are useless. Get out of my sight.
He pointed with the head of his bone club, his words dripping with vehemence. ZostaMax departed for his bunk, glad to be away from the belligerent leader, wondering why Thulvox had pointed out who Ibnex's mother was. ZostaMax was well aware of the political and familial ties his only friend had. Due to the community's general distaste for ZostaMax, they didn't let him stay in the chambers that served as the barracks for all of the other watchmen, leaving him to bunk with the hopefuls, the younger boys who wanted to be watchmen, just as he had once been. These kids had the heart, but they weren't big or strong enough to fight Balauri yet. Most of them hero-worshipped Thulvox, and because of the commander's open aversion for ZostaMax, they too gave him a wide berth, buttressed with suspicion. He slipped in through the open door, past the sleeping boys, some hardly old enough to be away from their mothers. Not that they all still had mothers. He slunk back into his corner, past the hopefuls. ZostaMax feared that sleep wouldn't come. He sat on his cot, thinking of the Balauri, and the noises they had made. Were they speaking to each other? Had they come back for a final word before leaving? ZostaMax's mind was too stirred up to let his body sleep. He kept wandering. He pondered the place where he lived, this metallic city of Lingrad and its many winding tunnels. Even if the shaman said they were hallways, they were still tunnels to him. He despised it sometimes. He never fit in, never belonged, even if it was the only place he had ever known. Despite his punctuality, his dignified service, his honesty, and his persistent consistency, the community still shunned him. He could never be good enough for them, and he took that personally. Politics weren't as black and white as fighting reptiles and were a battle he'd rather not fight. He had survived the encounter for this day. He pushed the thoughts aside and finally laid down. The aches and stiffness caught up with him, and soon he succumbed to sleep, struggling with mixed results to keep the night's gore out of his slumber. Well, hello, A.C. Sherman. Yeah, it does have a very interesting book cover, doesn't it? I need to know more about it to understand why the book cover is the way it is. And hello, everyone. Obviously, end of chapter 1. And now we move on to a deep breath and chapter 2, Upstart. Summer lingered this year, the air staying warm long after dark. Warm air currents rose from the sands late into the evening, making long-distance flights across the vast expanse of the dunes possible, even after the light had faded from the sky. Tarko was already taking full advantage of this. The sun had already set, yet the hot air kept his blood warm and his wings inflated. He still tingled with warmth and excitement as the air held him aloft. Carried upward on the warmth wafting from the peak of a dune far below, letting the current carry him even higher. He rolled his shoulders and held his tail out straight like a crimson tree branch. His energetic young flesh was eager for the hunt. The dingy red of his scales kept him warm longer than the rest of the big, winged lizards of his kind. His darker scales helped him absorb the morning's heat faster. He recovered from the cold of night, letting him become mobile sooner than the rest of his cold-blooded brethren. At the moment, he consciously took advantage of his color, the deep red scales, nearly as dark as the night's star-spangled sky, helping keep his body and the ill will it bore hidden. He had left the rest of his clan behind, striking out from their roost of his own volition. He believed many of the others had become slow and weak, exercising too much caution in their old age. Tarko's young and exuberant bloodthirst didn't have the patience for the rules that tried to govern him. Tarko went out hunting against the direct orders of the clan's alphas, intentionally disobeying their explicit instructions. He did something he believed in even more, breaking the standing orders without a second thought. Tarko believed the alphas had become too weak, not capitalizing on the opportunity the late summer afforded them to kill their greatest foes. These foes didn't have a real name. Each member of the clan had a different name for them and a different reason to hate them. He called them softlings, and he yearned for their blood, because they had spilled the blood of his parents. He sought the blood of the strange creatures out here in his desert. These strange little warm-blooded pale things had soft skin and hair. They bore no scales, no shells, no fangs, no claws. Yet hundreds of them survived, living in some strange cave, made of some odd material. It was hard like stone, but smoother and flatter, and sounded terrible when scratched with claws. Tarko and the others called it a cave, even though it was not, but they didn't have a better word for it. 3 generations previously, the strange sideways obelisk had just appeared, with the odd pale inhabitants already inside and established. The softlings couldn't fly. The thing they lived in must have risen from the ground. Tarko could think of no other explanation for it, much like its occupants. Surely it couldn't fly. It was much too large and very inert. The strange not-cave had proven a good place to roost, for the strange stone grew warm quickly, even in the weak light of the early morning. It grew warm faster than even the best stones on the mountains. The pale softlings lived inside it, but Tarko had never seen them on top of it. He had spent several days on top of their domain, watching their comings and goings, without them even knowing. He thought of them as fools, for they only kept watch in one direction. If he just flew past their nest, turned and approached from the far side, to land atop their cave's stones, not Stone Hill, they never noticed. Tarko marveled over the fact that the softlings survived despite their dim obliviousness. Tarko coiled his mind around the softling's hive, unsure of its true nature. He knew it wasn't stone, but he had no better word to describe the material. Not being a hole in the mountain, he couldn't rightly call it a cave. It was strange, artificial, and out of place. It didn't belong, just like the soft, pale things that lived in it. Like a colony of fleshy, squirmy sandworms that died in the sun, if dug up. The hive left an uncomfortable feeling in his gut. The weird way that it stuck out of the sand was just wrong, like it had fallen from the sky. His gut told him it had fallen from above, but that wasn't possible. Mountains didn't fly. Tarko had grown impatient with his clan's alphas. They may be the oldest mating pair in the clan, but that did not guarantee they were the smartest. They hesitated to attack, blinded by an overabundance of caution, he figured. The lingering heat made it so the entire pack could fly out in force to eradicate these strange pale creatures that didn't belong. Yet the alphas did not capitalize on this advantage. They held him back. They held the whole crush back and let the opportunity slip between their talons. Tarko was the quick-witted one, the one committed to his cause. Those pale little creatures had been out there in the dunes for generations, burning things, making noise and light at night, an unnatural, disgusting abomination that ignored the natural day-night cycle of the world. They killed his brethren whenever they got the chance. At first, it was dangerous to get close to their cave. It killed his great-grandfather with thunder. He had fallen from the sky after being struck by noise. Many had died in that manner, though none had in Tarko's lifetime. Gradually, Tarko had overcome the fear of being in proximity to that unnatural place, despite the Alpha's insistence on extreme caution. He regarded the softlings with supreme disgust and earnest contempt. The worst transgression forcing his claws into action was that the softlings had even started spreading beyond their hive. One even lived on its own in the depths of the desert. Others regularly made trips from their cave thing to the canyons to steal the water from the streams. Recently, other hunters spotted them going farther out from their hive, traveling in larger groups that were too dangerous to attack. These wandering groups spending more and more time afield, too. He didn't want them to establish a second infestation somewhere else, spreading like scale rot across the back of the desert. The Alphas had spoken with traveling members of other clans. The other clans had never seen or heard of anything else like the Softlings, no matter how far or wide they had traveled. For the moment, it remained a localized infection, something that, if removed promptly, wouldn't be able to spread further. The Softlings were curiously strange in their nasty way. Smart enough, they could communicate amongst themselves at least. Their bodies were all soft and wrong. They walked on two legs, and they didn't even have tails. They didn't belong here, and Tarko wanted nothing but to make them not be here. He suspected they weren't even safe to eat. As far as he knew, no one had ever tried. He refused to be that foolish. As the warm air currents carried him higher, he calculated his move to the next updraft. He left the air column he had been circulating on, curling one wing slightly as he banked, and let himself fall off the top of the warm air. He sank heavily into the cooler air and lost altitude surprisingly fast. Tarko beat the air with several powerful strokes of his wings before he found the next air column off the peak of another dune. Even warmer and stronger than the previous, it carried him upwards again. Tarko shrugged through the air, with a few more wing beats reaching the pinnacle of the column. He was mentally preparing himself to slip off the air column in search of the next when he spotted the twinkle on the horizon he wanted to see. The faint light flickered in the distance. The fire. The incessant burning of wood was one of the things about those soft-bodied vermin that bothered him most. Now it aided him, a beacon heralding him to their destruction. Tarko understood how precious the trees were. Trees sheltered his prey, and the constant destruction and burning of wood worried him. Tarko used the distant fire like a bright navigational star and homed in on it, twisting his face into a toothy, hungry smirk. With renewed vigor, he tucked a wing again and slipped silently through the night sky, bounding from one column of air to another across the desert, using what heat, still radiating from the sun-baked and sand below, he could find. His eyes lit with the distant firelight. Tarko got himself directly over the bonfire, riding its turbulent air currents high over the cave entrance. The smell of the burning wood overpowered his nose, even from this altitude. He widened his orbit around the superheated air, putting just enough distance between himself and the air column over the fire that he sank slowly through the blackened sky without having to beat his wings, yet close enough to the column that it still kept the broad span of thin membrane sprouting from his shoulders warm and tingly. His flesh nearly quivered with anticipation. He could see the tiny shapes of softlings moving about near the edge of the firelight below. He rolled his head sideways and peered down at them with one of his keen eyes. If he dipped his head to look with both eyes, it would have influenced his flight. He reminded himself of his childhood flying lessons. Body follows the eyes. He could see several of the softlings returning to the cave, slipping out of the darkness like spirits. How they stayed so active through the cold of the night was beyond his understanding. Typically, only the smaller insects were truly nocturnal. Yet, these soft bipeds were always doing something, always had some activity going on. Tarko shook his head, ridding himself of the speculation. Speculation wasn't the reason for his visit. As the softlings mewling about below split up, he chose his target and tucked his wings, holding them wrapped over his body like a sheath. He plummeted from the sky like a murderous meteor. He narrowed his eyes as the increased airspeed tried to dry them out, struggling against the urge to close the inner semi-transparent eyelids, not wanting the blurred vision to cost him. He free fell for only a heartbeat. Too long, and he wouldn't be able to slow down enough without hurting himself. He rolled his shoulders forward to catch the air current in his armpits and let it open his wings again, oozing them back out into the night sky. He didn't snap them all out at once, for that might be catastrophic too. Even as he eased them open, the strain on the thin skin was painful as the tiny membrane stretched over the air, trying to contain his weight. If he had waited too much longer, he would have torn his skin struggling against the air currents. He briefly chastised himself, remembering one of his broodmates who had made that mistake when they were younger and free-fallen from too high and waited too long to open his wings. He tore the membranes from his flesh in a panic, trying to slow down too fast at too low a height, and made a mess of himself on the rocks in the mountains near the nest. Tarko focused on the quickly approaching desert floor and his victims below. The strange pale creatures rotated its small, round, noseless head up to look at him as he dropped low enough for the firelight to reflect off his dark scales, rather than letting the sky's shadows swallow his silhouette. He let the muscles in his wings relax again. He plummeted through the remaining gap onto his victim, letting the small, unarmored body catch his weight. His now deflated wings fell over both of them, enshrouding the victim in a curtain of dark hatred, the last thing the softling would ever see. Tarko, with a flurry of teeth, clamping jaws, and claws, with joyful bloodlust, he set about disassembling his victim. The other small, soft creatures fled and made odd barking noises. Their motion hardly drew his attention as he mauled his victim with a vigor that was somewhere between hunger and hatred, reverence and lust. Eventually, he lowered his wings and brought his head up, reopening his awareness. The smell of their strange, salty liquid secretions wafted through the fire's dancing flames to him. He left one victim and approached the others. His disgust at their oily scent made him only more enraged. Targo kept his head low, just high enough that the scales of his chin didn't touch the broad, flat stone that served as the stage for their death dance. The air was cooling quickly now, and he wanted to take as much heat from the fire and the stone as possible. He used the muscles running down the top of his long neck to lift and lower his head as he nearly slithered across the stone, his jaw mirroring the contours of the rock. He worked his mind, now dazed with bloodlust, to focus through the mental fog of violence and hatred as he approached the strange creatures that he didn't understand, flicking his eyes about to make sure he wasn't being snuck up on. struggling between his mind and his instincts as he debated on the best way to approach the three before him. They carried sticks, sticks that hurt, and the three of them together gave him pause. Tarko closed the gap and squared them up, deciding to make a leap for the one on the end. He wanted to hurt it and get away before the other two could hit him with their sticks. The one that stood in the middle had a longer stick that made him even more wary. He sank to his haunches and readied himself to pounce, tightening all the muscles in his legs, even coiling his tail like a spring against the rock behind him. As he readied his mind through the fog of bloodshed, a new gust of wind rolled over him. He recognized the uneven blasts of air as someone landed behind him. The air, scolded by the vicious beat of their cold-blooded wings, pushed the flames around, making the light dance erratically with its passing. As it stretched and bent the shadows, Tarko wasn't alone with the pale vermin anymore. He and his prey didn't move. Unsure of what was going to happen, he dared not turn his head to look. Soon, the smell percolated past the wafting smoke. Tarko could identify them by smell alone as they got closer. He recognized the powerful, heady smell of a joined female pair. Churn and Scow, his clan leaders. The Alphas had arrived. Tarko withered, caught intentionally disobeying their explicit directions. They had come all this way just to fetch him. The effort required on their part was liable to leave them tired and short-tempered. Tarko figured the two of them were more likely to hurt him than the three softlings in front of him. He nearly leaped at his prey right then. That would surely be suicide. If the softlings didn't kill him, the Alphas probably would afterward. He spent a moment weighing the action's merit. A claw landed on his shoulder, then a second on his other shoulder. He nearly winced at their touch, his coiled muscles winding yet tighter. A single word oozed out of Churn's nostrils, her voice so low in frequency it was both felt and heard. Something veiled and threatening without Churn even having to open her jaws to speak.
Come.
Slowly, gingerly, Tarko followed them back to the other side of the fire. Both Churn and Scow walking on their hind legs, asserting their dominance and regal superiority to him in front of the softlings, forcibly making him subservient to them in front of his most hated foes. It both infuriated and frustrated Tarko. Once out of earshot, they started in on him.
You insolent hatchling! You young, dumb upstart!
Tarko looked into the distance, his eyes staring off into the darkness somewhere between the horizon and where the ring of firelight ended, refusing them to let them be the focus of his eyes, not paying them any more heed than he must. Churn continued for Scow.
We can't afford to lose you. You may be overeager, but you also hold promise. You are at the forefront of your generation. Even if you don't lead them, you still bring them motivation.
Scow took over.
Yes, these creatures are a threat to us. Things are getting tough for us, for the entire clan. Fewer eggs are hatching than they used to. We still aren't comfortable with your ideas. We think it is a risk we need not take. But if you are going to be this stupid about it, running off on your own to face down their horde.
He trailed off and looked over his shoulder at the three softlings still standing at the entrance to their cave.
Despite your insolence, you are too valuable to risk losing. Every member of the Crush is too valuable these days. If you are going to insist on doing this, then wait a couple of days. We'll do it another night together, as a clan.
Chern added,
Provided the heat holds for a few more days while we gather our strength.
Her mate continued,
We'll get inside their hive, make a mess of things. We'll hurt them badly.
the anger oozing into his voice, too, his instinctual bloodlust taking over. Chern wanted to get things over with before her counterpart got out of hand, too.
Come on. They are smart enough to communicate. Let's go apologize, and maybe they won't suspect anything in the coming days.
Her hand still on his shoulder, Chern led Tarko back toward the three softlings still on the other side of the fire, guarding their nest. They stood face to face again, and the disgust and hatred creeping back into Tarko's heart. Chern grew impatient as Tarko got lost in thought over the small, strange bipeds. She stamped a clawed foot, settling all her weight onto one leg. Tarko felt the force of her stamp through the stone they stood on. Tarko slowly and solemnly apologized for killing one of their number. Speaking forced and weak words, heartfelt or not, it was an apology. He wasn't sure if they would have understood him, even if it had been more sincere. It was enough to satisfy the alphas, at least. Chern led him away from them before someone tried something stupid as the tension continued to rise. She motioned for Tarko to lead. The night was cooler now, and he struggled to gain traction with his wings, but he got airborne. The darkness swallowed him from sight as the three took off together. He guided his alphas home, hiding his mischievous satisfaction. He had won. His will was becoming law, and he hadn't even given the orders. It was not a single massive victory, but a step in the right direction. He had forced their hand. Maybe he could wrestle leadership from them someday, and not have to do things underhanded. All right, so we got to see from the side of man, and now the side of the lizard. What do you guys think? Are they ever going to learn how to understand each other? I guess you have to read the book to find out, huh? But now let's go ahead and jump in with the final chapter that we're reading of Altar of Scales, and that would be Chapter 3, Man or Beast. It had been several days since the scout's death. While the community continued to mourn her passing, the shaman and Thulvox had spent all their time since that night in council. ZostaMax figured they had to be planning something. Rumors about their discussions abounded, each more heinous and crazier than the previous. ZostaMax didn't keep track of the conspiracies. He did his job, took his shift, and quietly stayed at his post. While keeping watch at the tunnel entrance overnight, he kept a low profile, doing his best to fulfill his duties without being noticed, or getting drawn into whatever debate the council was undoubtedly having upstairs. He didn't want to pick sides or get involved. He wasn't the most social of people at the best of times. The only person he truly considered a friend was Ibenex. Few people were willing to associate with ZostaMax, avoiding him on principle, lest their faith in the shaman come under question. Ever since he watched his father get carried off by Balauri, ZostaMax did not feel so faithful to the shaman's word. Thulvox, champion of the guard, accused ZostaMax of negligence, placing the scout's loss on his shoulders. ZostaMax did his best not to think about it. He wondered if they would throw him out, like Magnavoy. Word had spread, though precisely what that word was he didn't know, but the people spat at him, gave him the foulest of looks, or ignored him entirely. He leaned on his spear a few paces out of the watchfire's light. Letting the darkness hide him, he mulled over the relationship he had with the people, or lack thereof. The people shunned him because he didn't unquestioningly and wholeheartedly believe the shaman. He tried to recall the names and faces of the dozen old matriarchs with hazardously long hair. The Council of Shamans kept themselves sequestered in the upper reaches of Lingrad, only coming out to tell the people that something had or was about to go wrong. Buried in the recesses of the metal tunnels, they saw only their own magics. They lived where the light came from the walls themselves, never venturing into the sun. Their avoidance of the sun was just as well, since its harsh gaze might burn the frail old women to a crisp. The only shaman he had ever met or actually spoken with was Ibanex's mother, Zastava. She was just as cryptic as the others. They always answered a question with another question. ZostaMax's problem now was his refusal to take the shaman's words at face value, as absolute truth. Everyone else thought him a disloyal cheat of some sort. He'd made the mistake of questioning the shaman aloud in a public meeting. ZostaMax had just come of age. He had been one of the hopefuls, waiting for physical maturity before becoming a watchman. It became all the harder for him to wait after the death of his father. He wanted revenge. He wanted to be just like his well-respected father, who at one time had even been friends with Thulvox. This confused him all the more why Thulvox hated him now. The council sent his father, Vladatine, outside by himself to do some menial tasks at the behest of the shaman. He was alone when he found two Balauri sneaking around. He had called for aid and stood to fight them until help arrived. ZostaMax's brother answered the call, but was too late. Both of them died, all because the shaman wanted to know how many lights were lit along the outside of Lingrad. The shaman's debate over building more watchfires or not had cost the lives of both his father and elder brother. To ZostaMax, this served as proof that the shamans weren't all-knowing, as unfathomable and omnipotent as they wanted to be, or as everyone believed they were. Not long after the death of his father, Zastava called a public gathering. She explained a terrible storm was on its way with wind and rain and floods of a magnitude they had never seen before. ZostaMax asked, "How do you know?" A moment of shocked silence passed. Collectively, they ignored him or at best gave him dirty looks. That first time, they gave him some leeway because of the recent loss of the entire male portion of his family. ZostaMax didn't learn from the dirty looks they shot him or how they ignored him. Later, on multiple other occasions, he asked similar questions. How can you be sure? Why would they need such materials? How do they already know that? The more questions he asked, the more violent the rejections became. Eventually, he learned to keep his mouth shut. A couple of other people secretly speculated upon the same topic ZostaMax did. On a couple of occasions, they spoke in private, but they were mostly just curious, not outright skeptical. As ZostaMax matured physically, he became a full-fledged watchman, following in his father's footsteps. Not long after taking on full watchman responsibilities, they sent him out to count Lingrad's lights too. ZostaMax grudgingly obliged, but made a fuss about it, and found himself drenched in a cold sweat the entire time he wandered Lingrad's rock and sand perimeter while counting the lights. In the nearly 2 years since, and he'd gotten nothing but the cold shoulder. Even the man who had trained him to fight Balauri wanted nothing to do with him anymore. He could no longer remember how many lights there were. Now that he stood alone, leaning on his spear, concealed in the darkness beyond the watchfire's rings of lights, that bothered him. He felt he should remember how many there were. His repetitive questioning made the other citizens realize it wasn't some phase, his youth, or hurt on his soul from his shattered family, but genuine doubt. That time, when he questioned the shamans, he went from overlooked to shunned overnight. He lost the few friends he had. No one but Ibanex spoke to him anymore, not in the 2 years while he stood watch. He hadn't seen his mother since the night of that assignment, leaving him estranged from his still living mother and sisters. Now even socially exiled, He had questioned the leaders too vocally to redeem himself, no matter how good of a job he did. An idea crept into his head. He could leave of his own accord. No one would miss him. Why work to protect all the people who cared not for him? Would it be so bad to get physically exiled too? The clouds hung low in the sky that night, covering it from horizon to horizon, keeping the temperature warm and the air humid long into the night by trapping the burning heat of the day. He couldn't see any stars. ZostaMax would watch the stars and wait for their wings of the Balauri to blot them out, his preferred method of spotting them. Not only had this proven a decent method for spotting their winged foe, he had learned many of the constellations, too. Despite the cloud layer blocking his view of the stars, he felt relatively safe for the moment. Buried in the shadow of a boulder he leaned on, hidden from the light of the fire, the wind blowing in his favor. Anything approaching would smell the fire and not him. ZostaMax was familiar enough with the surroundings he could still differentiate the silhouettes of the rocks and trees despite the dark of night. He had stood in this spot for so many long nights before. He recognized all the silhouettes arrayed before him. He could easily spot if anything was out of place or didn't belong. His mind rolled back to musing over his situation. How the others who had expressed their apprehensions immediately refused to speak to him after he had doubted the shaman's leadership one too many times. Everyone now refused to do business with him, especially anyone with any position of control or responsibility. This made it nearly impossible for ZostaMax to accomplish anything. The shaman asked him to repent. They expected him to make an offering to show his humility and beg for, or earn, forgiveness through bribes, as was the accepted practice for other heretics and transgressors. ZostaMax had scoffed at the idea and stubbornly stuck to his own words, refusing to betray himself. He didn't know what rumors the shaman had spread through the populace on his behalf. He unblinkingly doubled down on his skepticism. The people became convinced he might betray them to a lizard. Some feared him being a watchman. They didn't want him shirking his duty or not fighting the Balauri, worried he might think, why do we need to fight them? How do the shamans know they're bad? ZostaMax whispered these phrases mockingly to himself in the privacy the darkness offered him. He snorted through his nose at the very idea. Everyone had been hurt by the Balauri. Every family had lost someone. To him, it was personal. He held on to his methodical, long-fused hatred. Those monsters took both his role models from him. His desire for revenge was a deep, cherry-red coal in the blackened depths of his soul's fire pit. This hatred for the Balauri fueled him now, a detailed, meticulous, and prepared loathing. It had let him tolerate his estranged social status, keeping him standing outside on hot days or windy nights, ignoring the community's dogmatic following of the shaman and their word. He had more important, burning thoughts in his mind, a hatred he could never forget, ever present and ever driving. Like that last ember, they would fester on long after the rest of the fire had gone out. Maybe one of the beasts would come calling, and he would get to earn the title of Balaur Slayer. Maybe he would get to avenge his lost family. Briefly, thoughts of his surviving family flashed to the forefront. His mother and younger sister. He hadn't seen either of them in years. His little sister was at that age where she would be growing quickly, and he doubted he would recognize her even if she came to slap him in the face. In the darkness leaning against his rock, he felt small, very alone, and very far from anything that mattered. He whispered gentle words only he could hear in the night's darkness. Maybe I am too stubborn for my own good, but I don't see how they expect every single person to be led by the nose, blindly following what the shamans tell them. Who gave them the authority? Who gave them the magic? Why did they send my father out by himself? A noise interrupted his thinking. A faint whisper, a distant whistle, easy to pick out against the silence of the still night. The day's heat, trapped by the heavy clouds, was still oppressive, long after sunset. He had heard the noise before. Air only sounded like that when beat under the wings of Balauri. ZostaMax immediately thought of the other watchmen on shift with him. No man stood guard alone, least of all a no-good traitor like himself. He filled his chest to capacity, sucking air in. ZostaMax broke the silence with a warning to the others. He shouted with such force his voice broke. It pained him to breathe afterward, but no one could ever doubt him this time, his call ringing deep into the tunnels of Leningrad. Balauri! And that is where we will leave off in Altar of Scales. Which means, ba-doop, ba-doop, it's time for A.C. Sherman's book. Who, if you guys want to stop in and say hello, he is in the YouTube channel right now. You are welcome to come on over and chat with him. Well, I bring you guys a noir story. So give me a moment while I switch books here. And then we will get ourselves started. Let's see, where is... So we are going to be reading the prologue, Chapter 1, and Chapter 2. That sounds good to everybody, doesn't it? I think so. Give us a good 3 chapters to get ourselves interested in A Noir Story by A.C. Sherman. You guys know you like it. You know you want it. You know you're here for it. And so... we will begin. A Noir Story by A.C. Sherman. Prologue. Norma decided the only solution to his problem was to commit cold-blooded murder. But was he up to the task? It was out of character for a 35-year-old white-collar softy like Norman to perpetuate a felony. He lived and worked in the law-abiding city of Troy, where in 2001, violent crime in Michigan was considered a Detroit problem. As product manager for the highly respected Deltronics Automotive Group, Norman was paid grown-up money to sit in a comfortable chair and babysit a staff of Steve Urkels and Poindexters. Norman parked his beta yellow Volvo in a dark alley across from an elite Bloomfield Hills mini-mall. Closing hours was hours ago. It was midnight. There were no pedestrians walking or random cars cruising. Norman clicked the dome light on and checked his face in the mirror. His blackened eye, cut lip, and blood-stained shirt meant that sometime earlier, Norman had been in a fistfight. More like Norman had become somebody's punching bag. On his passenger seat there was a brown lunch bag that contained something other than a ham sandwich. It sat next to a manila envelope labeled Chesterfield Detective Agency. He opened the envelope and removed a mini cassette player and 10 black and white photos. Norman looked at the reality-shattering images. They confirmed the coital activities of his wife with a businessman. The photos, taken in secret, revealed them kissing outside a cheater's motel, wearing nude and lewd behavior in a park, and having shown off sex at a rave party. Norman was average-looking, but his wife was a stunner. She had long blonde hair and the kind of tight body and shapely legs strippers would die for. Her name was Denise. The businessman she was having an affair with was Ving Furman. He was ruggedly handsome and broad-shouldered, with the persona of a charming brute. Norman looked across the street at the reserved for business owners parking lot. He eyed the lone vehicle that was parked under a dim streetlight, a brand new 2001 Hummer, painted alpha red and adorned with the boastful personalized license plate, Ving. Norman shifted his eyes to the dimly lit row of high-end boutiques, a fancy salon, a stockbroker's agency, and Ving's Jewelry and Gems, where the office light, as usual, was still on. Norman dropped the photos on the passenger seat and picked up the brown paper bag. He poured the contents on top of the photos. A set of wires, colored black, blue, gray, and green. A magnetic LED timer, a C4-encrusted explosive device, and handwritten instructions. Despite being a non-engineer in charge of engineers, Norman had one talent that everyone on his staff envied: his ability to memorize a written document, be it pages in a geeky technical manual, an office email, or tech grad's job application. His techies were constantly amazed that, weeks or even months after first reading an engineering report, Norman could recite it verbatim. A drop of sweat from Norman's forehead dripped into the bomb's instructions. It was proof that Norman was fully aware that what he was attempting required alpha balls. He nervously studied the bomb instructions, committing every detail of the scribble to memory. The more he focused, the heavier his breathing became, the early signs of an oncoming asthma attack. Before full frantic could set in, Norman retrieved his inhaler from his pants pocket. The inhaler calmed Norman down and allowed him to return to his kind of normal. Norman returned the inhaler to his pocket. He thought a test drill would be a good idea. He picked up the wires and the C4 device. Then he hesitated. Could he go through with this? Was it worth it? He put the gadgets down and picked up the mini cassette player. He pressed the play button. What he heard was pillow talk between his wife Denise and her business client and lover, Ving Furman. Norman should work for Domino's Pizza, Denise mused. He comes in 5 minutes or less. 30 minutes, Ving's deep baritone corrected her. Domino's comes in 30 minutes. Denise let out a chuckle. Norman couldn't go 30 minutes if he swallowed a whole bottle of Viagra. The sound of silk bedsheets rustling indicated that Denise had mounted Ving for another round of adultery. You are like the moon, Denise purred. You stay up all night. The bed springs began creaking in rhythm. Norman listened, either to suffer more humiliation or for motivation. Apparently it was for motivation. Full of sudden fury, Norman grabbed the bomb, the timer, and the wires. He got out of his Volvo and caught his reflection on his car window. He stared into his eyes and told himself, Get Denise back. Get my life back. Norman walked out of the alley's darkness. His angry eyes double-checked the area. The light in Ving Furman's office had gone out. There was still nobody walking around. And still zero traffic. Norman made his way to the parking lot and slid himself under the red Hummer. Norman talked himself through the process. Step 1, clean a spot to mount the device and timer. He got out his key ring and turned on the small flashlight that was attached. He shined it on the Hummer's undercarriage. He took out a handkerchief and wiped off a spot in the center of the enormous fuel tank. He was nervous as the metallic ends of the device and timer caught metal. Step 2, insert one end of the black wire into the device and insert the other end into the timer input jack labeled A. Norman inserted the ends of the black wire as instructed. Norman told himself he was doing the right thing. His breathing became easier. Step 3, insert one end of the blue wire into the device and insert the other end into timer input jack labeled E. For the first time in a long time, Norman grinned. He inserted the blue wire with the confidence of Michael Jordan at the tip-off of a Game 7. Step 4. Insert one end of the green wire into the device and the other end into the timer input labeled G. Norman reasoned with his conscience. He convinced himself this would be well worth a few sleepless, guilt-ridden nights. The main thing that mattered was Denise would return to him. Norman slam-dunked Step 4. Step 5. Set activation time on the timer. Norman pressed the Set Time button on the timer. The LEDs flashed, going through the motions of a cheap alarm clock being set. And since it only takes me 5 minutes to come, Norman set the timer to activate the C-Force device in, what else? 5 minutes. Step 6. Press the Start button. This is it. Norman could have shut it down, walked away, then and there, with no harm done. But he would have lost his wife to Ving, and there was only one way to stop that from happening. Norman pressed the Start button. The LEDs began its countdown at 0500. Step 7. Get far away from the device and timer. Norman pocketed the handkerchief. He was about to turn off the flashlight when it shone on something protruding from the timer. A gray wire. Norman defended the flawless memory he was so proud of. Gray wire? There's no step for a gray wire. He wondered if it mattered. Everything looked all right. He took a deep, satisfied breath, turned off his flashlight, and pocketed his keyring. Just complete step number 7. Norman gathered himself. He was about to slide out from under the Hummer when the Hummer's lights flashed and he heard the clicking of doors being unlocked. Norman turned his head and saw a pair of very stylish shoes on the driver's side. He looked around and a pair of men's sneakers stood on the passenger side. Norman looked at the LEDs on the timer. 4:50 and counting. A vehicle approached. Its headlights shone under the Hummer. Norman felt like a trapped rabbit under a spotlight. He could sense the vehicle had parked. He heard the driver get out and walk up to Ving. Norman slid over to the edge to sneak a peek. Just as he read the City of Birmingham Police Department emblem on the police car, Ving repeated what the officer had just spoken to him. A purse snatcher? The LEDs read 4:35 and counting. Time to abort. Norman scooted back under the Hummer and frantically searched his pockets for what the dome light in his Volvo was shining on. The handwritten instructions for the bomb and timer. Maybe that gray wire mattered after all. Norman mouthed an exasperated and silent fuck. The timer mercilessly continued to count down. Its LEDs glowed brighter and brighter. Oh, man, this is not going to go well. Of course, we'll find out in a moment if it does or not. Excuse me. And am I wearing a gray t-shirt in honor of the cover? Sure, why not? Let's say that's what it is. Not just that this happened to be the t-shirt that I grabbed today and put on. It's in honor of A Noir Story. That's my story. Oh, A Noir Story. I ain't got a witness, and you know I can't prove it, but that's my story, and I'm going to read it to you. All right, guys, are you ready? Let's continue on, shall we? With 1. Red LEDs flashed 59 seconds and continued to count down. The timer had less than 1 minute to go before it reached 0000. But it was not the timer Norman had attached to Ving Furman's Hummer. It was not the one he had connected to a C4 bomb and secured to the gas tank with unmovable magnets. This LED timer was attached to a control panel of his wife's exercise machine. 1 month ago. Denise relentlessly worked her stair climber as a Jane Austen workout video played on television. Denise was in her basement, which she had transformed into an exercise utopia, with enough equipment to start a Planet Fitness franchise. It included free weights, an elliptical, a rowing machine, a squat rack, a stationary bike, and a treadmill. Her bookshelves were filled with all of Jane Austen's VHS videos, and every weight loss and fitness book ever published. One of them worked. Denise's 30-year-old body was in better shape than Jane Austen's. On the video, Jane Austen stopped her exercise routine to explain a nutrition chart with the usual check with your doctor banter. "Come on," an impatient Denise complained to the television. The timer hit 0000. Denise picked up the remote and fast-forwarded the video to a high-energy aerobic workout. She glided off the stair climber and harmonized her body with Jane Austen's movements without missing a beat. The door at the top of the staircase opened. A wiser husband would never dare to interrupt Denise's sacred morning ritual. "Denise!" Norman called down. Denise ignored her husband. "Breakfast!" Norman added, with a pleading tone in his voice. Denise doubled down on focusing on her workout routine, which she performed better than Jane Austen herself. At the top of the stairs, Norman stood in his yellow pajamas, vexed over Denise's non-response. "Denise!" Norman repeated, louder and yet more pathetic. "In a minute, Norman!" Denise shouted back with irritation. Norman was disappointed that Denise would treat this morning like every other morning. He closed the door and headed to their bedroom. The walls in Norman and Denise's bedroom used to be colored a soft brown, denoting peace and security. Norman didn't resist when Denise wanted them repainted to feature a bold and vibrant red hue. He even thought it might help spice things up between them. This was before he found out that Ving's Hummer was the same color. Norman sat on the edge of the bed waiting for Denise to finish her workout. He had her routine timed. He checked his watch, got up, walked into the bathroom, and faithfully turned on the shower. Denise entered the bathroom looking like a wet mop. Her face, hair, and clothes were soaked in sweat. She gave Norman a peck on the cheek, the cue for him to close the door on his way out. Denise kicked off her gym shoes, removed her sweaty clothes, and discarded them in a hamper. When Denise stepped into the shower, her pubic hairs revealed she was not a natural blonde. Denise had been born a brunette, but since blondes have more fun, she had decided to become one. After Denise had showered, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror primping the skirt suit she wore. It was red and guaranteed to raise the temperature in any room she walked in. Norman entered. He was still in his yellow pajamas and was hiding a gift box behind his back. Denise began applying a lipstick that matched her red attire. Norman asked her, "Do you know what day it is?" "How could I forget?" Denise teased her hair and Norman at the same time. "Today is the day I start that sales and marketing course." Norman didn't take it as a tease. He got triggered and sidetracked. "Sales and marketing?" Norman replied as if Denise had said prostitution and child slave labor. The gift box behind his back suddenly made Norman feel like the kid who took a baseball glove to a football game. "That's going to be quite a change," Norman lamented. "Change is the whole idea," Denise replied forcefully as she selected an outfit-matching purse from the closet. "Why change horses in the middle of a—" Norman interrupted himself and quickly shifted from complaining to complimenting. "You're a very good accountant. A damn good bookkeeper." Denise transferred the contents of yesterday's black and gold purse into today's red selection. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life hidden behind some corner desk working with boring numbers." Denise maintained her emphatic tone. "I want to work with people." "Why work at all?" "Our mortgage requires 2 grown-up paychecks. You planned it that way, remember?" "I remember," Norman said with a twinge of regret. He finally realized the conversation had gone sideways. He was eager to get it back on track.
I also remember our anniversary.
Norman surprised Denise with the gift box. He handed it to her as if he was spreading a royal flush in a do-or-die high-stakes poker game. And in a way, he was.
I did not forget,
he said with self-congratulation. This time, Denise replied in a pat-on-the-head tone one would give to a misbehaving puppy who was finally acting as expected. She opened the gift box, expecting jewelry and a card. Did Norman know his wife, or did a boxed set of Jane Austen's workouts on DVD? Oh, Normie! Denise was so thrilled, she gave Norman a kiss that would make a soap opera star blush.
I've got to check out eBay more often,
Norman mused. Denise flipped through the DVDs. If only we had a...
I set up a DVD player while you were in the shower,
Norman interrupted. That's all Denise needed to hear. She made her DVD selection. I'll watch this one tonight.
Tonight?
I've got 3 pounds to lose before the end of the week.
From where? Under your feet?
Denise shot Norman a look. It was half playful, half serious.
Remember our honeymoon? Norman retreated. How much you enjoyed daytime Paris?
And the nights? Denise smiled as she shouldered her purse. It
was the first and only time I enjoyed having an asthma attack.
Norman grinned.
Remember that little cafe?
The Café Maurice.
You loved their breakfast menu.
And with that, Norman confidently took Denise by the hand and led her into the dining room. Last night, Denise, while she slept, Norman secretly transformed their ordinary dining room into a replica of the Café Maurice in Paris. He had taken the time and expense to have the chef's plates, cups, dinnerware, napkins, tablecloths, and menus shipped in, all the way from France.
A crisis at work got in the way of my plan to take you on a surprise trip to Paris,
Norman said apologetically.
So, I brought Paris to you.
Denise slowly circled the candle-lit table. It was laid out with her favorite French breakfast. Norman put a white cloth on his arm and described the meal with a hammy French waiter's accent.
Roasted pork chops with shellfish and lemon balm sauce. Potted rabbit cooked in chablis with spicy marmalade.
Norman waited for Denise to comment on his impersonation of the waiter that served them at the Café Maurice. Denise stood there speechless. Well, almost. Look at all those calories, she complained. Norman reverted to his normal voice.
Don't worry. Less fat than a cheeseburger. I checked.
I stopped eating cheeseburgers 3 years ago. One of the candles started to flicker. It fought the shifting air in the room, trying to keep itself from going out.
Let's just...
Norman stopped in mid-sentence. His eyes followed Denise's gaze. He caught sight of what put such a disgusted look on her face. In the middle of the table, a portrait was positioned between the 2 candles, of Norman and Denise's wedding photo, taken 8 years ago, way before Denise started working out, when she weighed over 300 pounds. Denise's eyes began to mist. I told you, she screamed disappointment at Norman. I never want to be reminded. She burst into tears and ran towards the front door.
But it's our wedding picture,
Norman pleaded with words that were unheard. Denise slammed the front door shut. 1 hour later, Norman was in his kitchen. Dressed for work in a white shirt and black tie, he placed his briefcase on the table and opened it. From the fridge, he loaded his briefcase with a sandwich, a bag of chips, and 3 bottles of Hawaiian punch. He closed his briefcase and was ready for another workday. His cell phone rang. He checked the number. He wasn't sure if he was up to taking the call. he forced himself to answer the persistent ringing.
This is Norman.
The inaudible caller on the other end of the phone cut Norman off in his mid-sentence. She spoke with a rapid-fire urgency, and the sound of her TV in the background did not help their communication. Norman ignored the distraction and focused on what she was saying.
Please inform Mr. Chesterfield,
Norman interjected between her talk in chew-gum manner.
I want a meeting as soon as possible.
Norman checked his watch. His 9 to 5 be damned.
I can be there within the hour.
The caller responded with something that did not immediately register with Norman. In fact, it confused him.
What?
Norman became annoyed when the caller clarified herself.
I'll write you a check,
Norman said, ending the phone call. Had a feeling with the workouts that might have been the case of what Denise was, but there we go. Denise has self-image issues. What are you going to do about it, right? Work out obsessively to Jane Austen. That's right. That's what she's been doing. All right, guys. We're going to get started here with Chapter 2, which is also the last chapter that we are reading tonight. As a reminder, before I get started on these, all 3 chapters from, what was it, Chasing Scales? That sounds like the right name, right? Am I right? Oop. Altar of Scales. I don't know why Chasing Scales made it sound right. Altar of Scales and A Noir Story will be available on the YouTube channel later this evening. Now, as a reminder, if you have any questions for A.C. Sherman, he is available in the YouTube channel for you to say hello to. And if not, that's okay too. We will listen to the words that he has provided to us as we start into 2. It was still morning when Norman parked his Volvo in the small parking lot that the Chesterfield Detective Agency shared with Little Caesar's Pizzeria, a payday cash advance loan office, and a 24-hour laundromat. Norman had wanted to hire a private eye who was a professional, experienced, and cheap. He got 2 of the 3. 30 minutes had gone by, and Norman was still sitting in Ed Chesterfield's office, waiting for Mr. Discreet and Professional to arrive. Norman could hear the grinding sound of the washing machines from next door. That manila envelope was on Chesterfield's desk. It was sealed and had been placed on top of the desk calendar. Norman glanced at the envelope but had no realization of its significance. What caught his eye was all the blank dates on the desk calendar, the worn-out coffee table, and the faded wallpaper. Norman wondered if he had made a mistake in hiring the low-rent Chesterfield Detective Agency. The door opened, and 50-year-old Ed Chesterfield entered. He was an unshaven, overweight, crew-cut, sporting ex-Marine, turned ex-Warren cop, turned low-rent private eye. In short, a professional bum. "Thanks for waiting," Chesterfield said. "I had an errand to run." Chesterfield sat a tall brown paper bag on his desk, then plopped his butt in his worn-out chair. Norman got right to the point.
You found something out?
There was a hard knock on the door, the quick, rapid kind that doesn't allow enough time for a response. Susie blasted in. She was Ed Chesterfield's part-time piece of ass, full-time pain-in-the-ass secretary. She shoved an invoice into Norman's hand. "Please make your check payable to—" Susie stopped at the sight of Chesterfield's disapproving eye roll. Susie gave Chesterfield a "you always tell me to make sure I do this" look. Chesterfield's miffed facial expression told Susie to leave. "He thinks he's Sam Spade," Susie verbally jabbed. "Watched The Usual Suspects 5 times. Still thinks Dean Keaton is Kaiser Sose," was her 3-punch combination as she closed the door behind her. Norman refocused.
You found something out?
He repeated. Chesterfield hesitated, then forced "I did" out of himself. Norman locked eyes with Chesterfield and waited with irritation. "First things first," Chesterfield said as he retrieved a bottle of Jack Daniels from his crumpled brown bag. It was way too early in the day for alcohol. Norman glared disapprovingly at the disheveled Chesterfield, took a shot glass from his desk, and twisted the cap off the bottle of Jack Daniels. As Chesterfield poured a shot, Norman thought about the disparaging things he was going to say to the company's security guard who recommended the Chesterfield Detective Agency to him. Chesterfield surprised Norman with a, "It ain't for me." After he said it, he slid the shot glass across the desk directly in front of Norman.
"I don't drink,"
Norman responded. Chesterfield's years of experience told him to leave the shot glass in place. Next, Chesterfield uttered the words that would change Norman's reality forever. "Your suspicions were confirmed." Chesterfield handed Norman the sealed manila envelope. Norman opened it cautiously, as if some wild animal might jump out and bite him. Chesterfield continued his report, doing his best to sound professional. "We were able to document several instances of your wife engaging in activities of a carnal nature with a third party." Norman opened the envelope, and something did jump out and bite him. 10 X-rated photos of Denise and Ving stung his heart and pride in the worst way. Denise was doing things to Ving and allowing Ving to do things to her that she had repeatedly told Norman that, according to her strict Catholic upbringing, was disgusting. "I am sorry," Chesterfield sincerely offered. Norman stared at the photos as if he expected them to change into images of him and Denise in Paris. When Norman gave up, he did the only thing left for him to do. He reached for the drink and gulped it down, and he did not object when Chesterfield refilled the shot glass.
"Who is he?"
In Norman's mind, it was a polite request, but the Jack Daniels made it come out as an insistent demand. Experience taught Chesterfield that focusing on the other man could lead to unintended consequences that could never be undone. So he avoided giving an answer by pivoting to a glass-half-full tactic. "In my experience, most flings are usually based on some fantasy," Chesterfield opined. He tried to give Norman hope with, "and fantasies always run their course as soon as everyday reality sets in." Norman stuck his hand in the manila envelope and reached for what was at the bottom of the envelope. "You can recommend a licensed marriage counselor," Chesterfield advised. Chesterfield sensed Norman's deep grief, and he continued to sincerely try to help him. "She has over 20 years of experience and has helped thousands of couples, too."
"What's this?"
Norman interrupted, as he held up the mini cassette player. "Audio confirmation," Chesterfield replied. "There is a DVD as well." Norman decided it would be too painful to hear the sound of Denise having sex with another man. He put the mini cassette player back into the manila envelope.
"You never answered my question,"
Norman complained. Chesterfield feigned ignorance. He tried to look puzzled. Once again, Norman asked,
"Who is he?"
"Your wife runs a one-person business."
"She does tax preparation, accounting, and bookkeeping."
"On-site and office visits."
"Is Denise screwing one of her clients?"
Chesterfield took a short, deep breath. "Ving Furman." Chesterfield regretted saying it before he even said it. It was the first time Norman had heard the name Ving Furman.
"Ving Furman,"
Norman repeated, with bitter green envy in his voice. Chesterfield offered Norman the business card of his marriage counselor friend. Norman took it with zero intent of calling her.
"And who is this Ving Furman?"
Norman inquired. "It doesn't matter who he is," Chesterfield reasoned. "Stray Dick is Stray Dick."
"It matters to me," Norman muttered. "It's impossible for it not to."
Chesterfield discerned that Norman's pride was like a scratched vinyl album that had captured a playback needle in its groove. No amount of ducking and dodging would suffice. Chesterfield relented. Ving Furman owns and operates a jewelry store.
Is he successful?
In order to be located in Bloomfield Hills, he would have to be.
So, every day, Ving Furman handles thousands of expensive diamonds, pearls, and rubies.
Norman spat out bitingly.
But he couldn't resist fondling my one and only thrift store Fugazi?
Norman sat there in silence. His inner emotions shifted between rage and depression. Chesterfield had seen it before, enough times to know what was going through Norman's mind. Norman. Chesterfield reached into the bottom drawer of his desk and retrieved another shot glass. He poured Jack Daniels into the glass and refilled Norman's. Chesterfield drained his drink and set the empty glass down. Norman matched his gulp. At this moment, Chesterfield no longer treated Norman as a customer, but as a friend, someone he felt comfortable talking to man. Chesterfield held up the bottle of Jack Daniels. One day, he lamented, the world might just run out of Jack Daniels. He set the bottle down and admired the famous logo. Heaven forbid. Or it might run out of oil or toilet paper, he continued. Norman's eyes were transfixed on the photos of unrestrained passion in his hand. But the world is never going to run out of young and beautiful women, Chesterfield declared. Chesterfield had hoped that stating such a simple and absolute fact would cause Norman to focus on his social future. Don't chase her, Chesterfield opined. Replace her. Chesterfield's words may have reached Norman's ears, but they did not touch his mind or heart, or pain. Norman was unmoved. Literally. He sat motionless with his eyes transfixed on those damn photos. No doubt you are considering what other options are available, Chesterfield surmised. You have two. Norman finally slid the photos and mini-cassette player back into the manila envelope. What was left in his hand was Chesterfield's invoice. He looked at the numbers. He had no idea if they were reasonable or not. He didn't really care. He retrieved his checkbook from his suit jacket. Option number 1, Chesterfield plainly stated. See a lawyer. Norman wrote out the check, signed it, and placed it on Chesterfield's in need of a serious polish or replacement desk. Chesterfield nodded appreciatively as he picked up the check. Option number 2, which Chesterfield's tone suggested he was advising. Forgive and forget. Norman looked at Chesterfield. This man must have never been cheated on, Norman thought, or stood up. His only relationships were probably one-nighters with drunk strippers and welfare hookers.
Option number 3,
Norman said with bitter and angry eyes.
Ving Furman.
Norman stood up. The shots of Jack Daniels and the wobbly chair with its uneven legs challenged his balance, but not enough to stop him from heading to the door, focused and resolute. Where are you going? Chesterfield asked with genuine concern.
To see Leo, the lawyer.
Norman stopped to think about it. He considered other options.
Or load my gun.
Do you think you can murder your way to happiness? Chesterfield asked. In my experience, Chesterfield said with a warning tone in his voice, when a man commits murder, or tries to, he ends up killing his own future.
Is that so?
That's it, everyone. That is our 3 chapters of A Noir Story. Admit it. You want to know more. You want to find out what's going to happen next. Did Norman go for the gun? Did Norman go for the lawyer? Did he go find himself C4 in a timer, as the preface might have or prologue, or whatever P word we started it with, might have said. I guess you are going to have to go and buy the book to find out, right? Remember, the book is available on Amazon. A Noir Story by A.C. Sherman. Stop out there and pick it up. Link to it will be on the videos that will be available on the YouTube channel. And now we have reached the end of our reading for this evening. I hope you guys enjoyed our selection tonight of a couple of chapters of... Why can't I remember the word? Altar of Scales. Altar of Scales. And A Noir Story. All these chapters are going to be available on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. On Tuesday, I'm going to be coming to you with another 2 authors for you guys. We will be diving into a short story by Vanessa Finati. You might remember Vanessa from the virtual book tour that I did last year alongside her. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And then we're going to read a couple of chapters of a work in progress of a psychological thriller being written by Tim Maloney. Who's Tim Maloney, you ask? Why, it's me. It is a work in progress. There's going to be a lot to be worked out on it. Thank you, AC. I appreciate that. Hope you enjoyed it. So that's what we'll do on Tuesday. We can talk a little bit about, or we'll read Vanessa's book. We'll read a couple of chapters of my book. Again, work in progress. I haven't even finished writing the thing yet. So things are subject to change, but I wanted to give you guys a little taste and see what you thought. And then I will be open to, a Q&A session if you guys want it on how I do a little bit of what I do. And then I've reached the end of the indie author books that I have. So if you know people who want me to read their stuff, send them my way. But until then, thank you all so much for spending a little bit of time with me tonight as we read Altar of Scales and A Noir Story. A couple of chapters of each. If you missed them, check them out on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. And until I see you guys again on Tuesday, have a wonderful week ahead, a fantastic rest of your weekend, and I will see you guys again soon. Good night, everybody.